Welcome again. Now we have the third conditional in Professional English 1. It's probably our last meeting in this course. The third conditional is also called conditional type 3 or conditional 3. Okay, we are going to talk about unreal situations in the past. Things that could happen or things that didn't happen, and those actions had or would have an effect in the past. The structure is quite fairly easy, really. Actually, is quite easy. I had studied harder. If I had studied harder, I would have passed the exam. If I had studied harder. That didn't happen. He didn't study hard. I would have passed the exam. So, if he studied harder, he would have passed the exam. Okay? So, he failed the exam because he didn't study hard enough. Okay? In the structure, we have the if clause. Do you remember the if clause before the comma? When the if clause comes at the beginning, we need to use the comma. If I had studied harder, I would have passed the exam. The main clause. The if clause is in the past perfect. Do you remember the past perfect? Let's see. The if clause with contractions. If I had studied is if I'd studied. We contract I had would do I'd. And in the main clause, we contract would have to would have passed the exam. If I'd studied harder, comma, remember the comma, I would have passed the exam. The cause is the if clause and the effect is the main clause. Okay? Try to remember this, the past perfect in the if clause and the perfect conditional in the main clause. The if clause, as I mentioned, we need the if, the subject, and the past perfect. For the main clause, we need a subject, would, could, or might, that are auxiliary verbs, have, and the past participle of the verb. Okay, the past perfect, for example, it is formed with the auxiliary verb had and the past participle of the verb. It's quite similar to the present perfect tense. I had been, you had been, she had been, whatever, had studied, had played, had worked. Had, in this case, is the auxiliary for the past perfect tense. Okay? Would, could, might, plus have, plus participle is the main clause. The perfect conditional, that is the name of this tense. The perfect conditional is formed with would, have, past participle. Remember, we can use could and might also. Would have been, or could have been, or might have been. We can also contract this. Would have been, would have arrived. Here we have an example with could and might. Could have stayed, might have gone. I'm contracting. Could have to could have, might have to might have. Might have. Okay. The third conditional is used to talk about things that didn't happen in the past. Did not happen in the past. It's a possibility in the past tense. It was a possibility in the past tense, actually. If you'd driven more carefully, you wouldn't have had an accident. Okay? We explained this, that you had an accident because you didn't drive carefully enough. If you've driven more carefully, comma, remember the comma after the if clause when it's at the beginning of the sentence, and after that, the main clause. You wouldn't have had an accident. The cause is if you've driven, and the effect is the main clause. Okay? Another example, if you sent her a present, she would have kept in touch. We are contracting. You had to use and would have to would have. She didn't keep in touch because you didn't send her a message or a present. She forgot you. The cause is the if clause and the effect is the main clause. Let's check if you understood. Okay. He crashed his car because he fell asleep while driving. Okay. The crash happened because he fell asleep. So, if he didn't fall asleep, what would the result be? If in the past perfect and the main clause in the conditional, the past conditional, the perfect conditional, if he hadn't fallen asleep while driving, he wouldn't have crashed. Hadn't fallen, the past perfect, wouldn't have crashed, the perfect conditional, would and have, perfect conditional. Would have, in this case, is wouldn't have. We negate, we construct the negation, the negative form, contracting would and not, wouldn't. And in the past perfect, had and not, hadn't. Okay, we couldn't go to the concert because we didn't have enough money. So, in this case, the money was the problem. If the money, the past perfect, if we had, of course, had enough money, we, yes, would have, and the past participle of the verb, would have gone to the concert. If we had, we would have gone with the contractions. Okay, and remember the comma, because the if clause is at the beginning of the sentence. I lost my job because I was late for work. That's easy. What would happen if he was on time? I is the main clause, is the result. How is the result? Is the perfect conditional. And the main clause comes after if. So, if we need to use an auxiliary verb, would, could, or might, and have, and the past participle, and after if we use the past perfect. Let's see. I wouldn't have lost my job if I hadn't been late for work. I wouldn't have lost my job if I hadn't been late for work. Okay? The main clause in the perfect conditional, wouldn't have, would have lost, would not have lost, wouldn't have lost, and the if clause in the past perfect, had not, hadn't been late for work. Another example. Strong wind and a collapsed bridge. If the wind, the past perfect, and after that, the main clause in the perfect conditional. The wind, the verb to be, the past perfect. Yes, had been. And collapse, we need the perfect conditional. The auxiliary, would, could, or might. The auxiliary verb have, and the participle of the verb. So if the wind hadn't been so strong, the bridge wouldn't have collapsed. If the wind hadn't been so strong, the bridge wouldn't have collapsed. Okay? The if clause in the past perfect and the main clause in the perfect conditional. Sally. Okay? No number, no call. Sally, where's if? If goes by the end of the sentence, so we don't need to use a comma. The perfect conditional. I could have. I could have called Sally if I had her number. We have various possibilities. Let's check. I could have called Sally if I hadn't lost her number. Repeat. I could have called Sally if I hadn't lost her number. The perfect conditional at the beginning and the if clause at the end in the past perfect. Okay, let's see. We have mistakes in these sentences. Mistakes that you need to find. Jim was so angry. He wouldn't have been angry if you talked to him. Okay, he wouldn't is the main clause. The perfect conditional. The perfect conditional comes with the auxiliary, have, and the participle, the past participle of the verb. He wouldn't, okay. Have, there it is. Been is the past participle of the verb to be. The if clause in the past perfect. The past perfect is with the auxiliary had and the participle of the verb. We don't have the auxiliary have. So we need to change you talked to him. If you had talked to him, okay? Now see, let me count to 10. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. Okay. What would he have cooked? That is the question form of the main sentence. And we need the conditional in the second place. Notice that we don't have the if in this case. Okay? Let's check. I understand this exercise is a bit tricky. Let's check. Didn't buy because should be in the past perfect. Okay, this is a very special case in which we don't use the if clause. Instead of the if clause, we have in case. There are many forms. English is also a very rich language. Okay? I told you to be careful. If you hadn't fallen over, you wouldn't have break your arm. Okay, let's analyze. If clause, past perfect. Main clause, perfect conditional. What is wrong? Let's check. The if clause, had and the past participle. Okay, there we have. Hadn't and fallen. Fallen is the past participle form of the verb fall. You wouldn't have break. Okay, would, have, and the past participle. Oh, that's the mistake. Instead of break, we need breaken. You wouldn't have broken. Sorry, I said breaken. Sorry, it's broken. You wouldn't have broken. Okay, again. This is another form, a very particular form of the third conditional without if. That's why it's not necessary to address this type of sentences as if clauses. It's more correct to say the third conditional clauses because not all will use if. Okay. Had I taken a taxi, that's the conditional form, the if clause without an if, and the second is the main clause. The if clause, the conditional clause comes with the past perfect. The past perfect uses had and the past participle form of the verb. Had is present, taken is also present, so we have a correct form in the first clause. After the comma, we need the main clause in the perfect conditional. How do we make the perfect conditional? Using would, the auxiliary have, and the past participle form of the verb. Obviously, that's the mistake. I would have seen. I would have seen. Okay, and finally, I didn't know the phone number. I'd mail to you if I had had it. Let's see. The if clause in the perfect past, in the past perfect, and the main clause in the perfect conditional. Okay? In this case, we have the if clause by the end, and so the first clause is the main clause, the perfect conditional. So obviously that's the mistake, because we need would, could or might, have, and the past participle form. Okay, so instead of I'd mail, I would have mailed it to you if I had had it. If I'd had it. Okay? Why didn't you tell me? I could have informed the police in case I knew all about it. Obviously, I knew, because it's the if clause that in this case, in case, is instead of if. If I had known all about it, or in case I had known all about it. Okay? Where is Jane? If you hadn't cheated on her, she wouldn't moved away. Okay, I gave you almost a tip for the answer. The if clause is in the past perfect, hadn't cheated, past perfect. She wouldn't move, not the perfect conditional. We need, yes, we need would, could, or might. Yes, she wouldn't have moved. Okay, this is the third conditional. As you can see, it's not as difficult as it looks. Again, thank you. It was a pleasure to be in touch with you in this course. Please, any doubts, don't hesitate to contact your teacher through the forums or the way he told you. Thank you again, and I hope to see you in the next course. Bye.